And we're live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Wednesday. Hello, moms and dads, and aunts and uncles, and everyone that's joining us today. Welcome to our second episode of a four-part series that we're really hoping, can really drive a very important conversation around a really important job that we have as parents. My name is Karabo, as you can see on the screen of Black Mom Chronicles, and I am always riding with Daddy Zibuse. Zibuse Kunene. Hi Zibuse, how are you?
Good morning, mommy. I'm good. I'm good. Feeling a bit tired, but otherwise strong. So life goes on, as we say. Welcome to everyone who is tuning in and watching us from wherever you are. We are very thankful and we honor your presence. Thank you for joining us. I shall hand over the reins to my
Yay!
awesome mommy, Karabo.
Awesome. So we're also grateful for you being here, despite your fatigue. We appreciate your time. Okay, so today's topic, as we have been advertising during the week, is about being a new mom and dad. So this is a continuation to last week's conversation where we're speaking about becoming a new parent. So this is the pregnancy journey and the mental and emotional process that happens when we really are building up to becoming a new parent, which is a big job, an important job. So today we're talking about actually getting and immersing yourself in the job and how that looks like. And how that can potentially also look like for parents and some of the challenges and beautiful experiences that come from those first few days, weeks, months, and eventually years of being a mom and a dad. So we're really looking forward to this one. So maybe let's start the conversation off talking about the actual journey of now having this new person, which is the labor journey, right? So
Yeah.
I always I always talk about how symbolic my labor was, because I went through the so-called natural route of giving birth as an option. I mean, we all have options to do selective C-sections, and sometimes things become a little more complicated. But I went through that route and went to a maternal clinic where I gave birth. And the significance for me is I wanted an unmedicated birth because I wanted to feel the experience of actually being a woman in labor. And I went through that experience and it was amazing. And I recorded it and I put it on my YouTube and it's been doing really well. And it was an empowering experience because I said, as a mom, if I can go through the physical experience of giving birth to a human, then I can really tolerate every aspect of being a new mother. Because I had been reading and learning about how challenging motherhood and new motherhood in particular with your first child is. So I was like, let's do this first. If I can do this, if I can tolerate how excruciating the pain is of actually giving birth, then I can really take everything else that I've been advised about how I'm not going to sleep ever again. And I'm going to be sitting with big emotions and this and this and that. So I had a particularly empowering labor experience. And my husband was there by my side, and sometimes he was rubbing the wrong places because he's also but him being there was absolutely beautiful because we really shared the journey together. So it wasn't kind of a big shock for him. It was traumatizing to an extent. I mean, um, but his actual physical presence there, and him just reaching out and holding my hand, was really lovely, and I think it really set up our parenting experience for a lot of success despite the challenges. How was yours?
Wow. I've got two children. Eh?
Mm.
The first one, she was born on June 16th. Now, her mother is from Limpopo.
Mm.
Well, actually, let me say it. Her granny is in Limpopo. So when the mother was ready to give birth, she then went home to her mom. And I remember that day I was working overtime and I was driving a City Golf. And the day prior, I was just hanging out with friends out till late. And the next morning, fortunately, you know how when God sets things up so perfectly, the client that I had to see was a mother who had just given birth about a few weeks earlier or a month or two earlier.
Okay.
And I was consulting with her at a business. So we're busy there talking, and I'm telling her my experience that the mother of my child is at home, and anytime she could be giving birth. And we were chatting via SMS that time because it was 2006. So I get the SMS, my water just broke, and I'm thinking, okay. And then I just called her. I was like, "Excuse me, can I just make a call?" Called her. And then I asked, she told me that no, it's just the nurses felt they needed to expedite the process, so they broke the water. I was like, so are you okay? Is the baby coming now? Says no, baby's not coming now. Cool. Okay, I can relax a bit. Now I'm in Joburg. She's in Polokwane. I keep consulting with the client. Now we're no longer talking about the work. We're now talking about the parental experiences.
You're talking about the broken water.
Yay. And then she texts me. She says labor pains. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, sorry, ma'am. I need to go. She was like, I understand. Pack your things up. I packed up. I drove from the client's office straight to the hospital. I went through every toll gate. I was driving at the speed limit and I couldn't even be faster. But fortunately, when I got there, I think it was around 4. When I got there, no, it wasn't 4. It was just before 4. When I got there, she hadn't given birth yet. But when I got to the labor ward, actually, her mother was there outside, and I could hear her screaming from the room. And I went there, got there, greeted her, held her hand, and she told me to get out because her aunt was there. Why? Like, no, please, just get out. Okay, fine. Went out. We waited. 4:15. I get an SMS on my phone. It's a girl, and that was her aunt sending it from the ward, from the labor room. And I was like, yes, I was excited. And then from where I was sitting, I could see the door to the labor room.
Yeah.
And I saw the nurse carrying like a small kind of thing. So just the top of the head, the hair was black, and she was going to, I think, wipe her down. So
Yeah.
I went and stood next to the door. When she came back, she asked me, "Are you the dad?" I was like, "Yes." So she says, "Why don't you say so?" She gave me the baby right there and there. And I was like, yeah. Went into the room. They were still stitching her up. And then the room was nice and warm. And I held her like I was like speechless. It was kind of like that song, yeah, like Whitney Houston, One Moment in Time.
Yeah.
That song played in my mind. I felt so much calm, so much peace. Probably one of my life's best moments.
It's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I also experienced the same. Like when I held my daughter, I always say like I experienced a form of love I don't think I've ever known before, like in my
Yeah.
entire life. So it's a really beautiful, life-changing moment. How did she ever explain to you why she did not want you in the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said if I stayed, she would not have been as strong. She would have probably cried or did other things. So she was just better without me. Which is unlike my son, who was then. Here's the interesting thing with my children: both are born in June, two separate mothers. and 3 days apart. Three,
Yeah.
10 years and 3 days apart. My daughter was born June 16th. My son is born June 13th.
Ah, okay.
Exactly 10 years apart.
Hectic.
So with my son, I was there throughout the journey. Um, and even when the doctor were prepping my wife to go in for the C-section, excuse me, I was there. We went into theater because then the way just her cervix was not opening up or dilating. So doctor decided let's do C-section. Anyway, when in the room, I had my phone because I wanted to capture the whole experience.
Yeah.
Um, I was there on the angle where the doctor was going to make the incision. I was literally there, standing by his side, all dressed up in those gowns with the thingy that covers the head. I watched it all. Saw him how he made the incision and then it started going in and then cutting and then they put that, I don't know what those things are called, but just lifting the baby out and then bringing him out. And the moment he was just out, I remember I checked the time. It was 4:30. So both were born in the afternoon. I was like, hey, it's a boy. And we had already known, but it was just exciting to see him come
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
in the head. So what they did is they first cut the umbilical cord, and then there's a piece of it that is left, which is kind of a bit longer.
Mhm.
And then they took him, and then they put him on this thing that's like a scale. He weighed 3.39 kgs, and then I asked the nurse if I could cut the rest of the umbilical cord, and she said yes. And I was like, yes, I was there. So she guided me on how to do it, and I made the cut. And then they just wiped him down, covered him up, and then I took him and showed his mom. While then they continued making the stitches. So I was there. So it's not even like there would be a point where they could say your babies were switched because like
Yeah.
I
They.
know I saw him, like I know. And
Yeah.
like I remember, with babies they always want to hear them cry and scream. Actually, my son, they kind of like pulled his hands like this. He just went, "Meh," and then they came, "Meh." So they didn't want to kind of spank him so that he can cry, but it's like, "Meh." Eventually, I was like, ah, and then okay, that's what we were
There's
looking
a
for.
proof of life.
Lungs are good.
It's
So
it's
it was
yeah.
an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah, it's amazing how your experiences are in such contrast between the first and the second one, because the second one you got uh, kicked out and the second one you really got an opportunity to experience way more than the mother.
Yeah.
Did the experiences feel different for you?
Um, they did in a way because I got to be there. I was not told by anyone else that it's a boy, it's a girl. Like I was there, but also for me, it's a journey that my wife and I had also discussed. That I'm going to be there. I didn't ask, should I be there? Do you want me to be there? It was like, I'm going to be in the room. I want to be in the room. Um, and so I was there. Plus the fact that between my first and my second, in between, I became part of Dads in the Picture, and being there or being part of it helped me to become a more conscious dad, become a more present dad, be aware of when I'm absent, be aware of when I'm being present, and when I'm present, what it is that I'm doing. So when we got the news that I was pregnant, as I shared last week, that I was in a meeting and I couldn't focus. But even from there, and the amazing thing is I declared that it was a boy long before we knew the gender. So when the baby was still like a dot on that scan, I said it was a boy. and all of it, then it just stayed consistent throughout.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you being in the room? Sorry, I want to go back to this a little bit.
Yeah.
You being in the room during the birth versus not affect your connection or relationship with the child? You sense the
No.
difference.
No. I'll tell you why. Because with my daughter, even though I was not in the room, but I was still in the ward. So when she came out, I was still there. So I was still present. And for both of my children, I was the first to hold them before their mother. And I could be the one to show the mother, this is our baby. Um, but now the distinction comes afterwards when the baby is born, because with my daughter, um, the following day I had to come back to Joburg. I had to come back to Pretoria, I mean, and and then I spent days away. Well, I think I came back and then I took leave and then went back to Limpopo. I think it was for about 3 days or so. And then I had to come back. And coming back this side was the hardest thing I could do, knowing that I'm leaving them behind. Um, I won't be seeing those early days. It made a big difference.
Was it
Versus,
paternity leave? The 3 days.
yeah, that paternity leave for 3 days.
That
So I
one
took,
that made no sense.
I know it doesn't. It didn't and it doesn't.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
10 days now, so they've pushed it up a little bit. We're making small progress, but still, 3 months for me versus 10 days for him is like such a huge difference. But baby steps, baby steps.
yeah,
Um,
interesting enough. I'm not sure where I shared this, but I was I was privileged that where I work, I was part of the team that was tasked to review the paternity leave. And when we did that, we looked into why is it that mothers are given the 12 weeks after the baby's born. Um, and we realized that the mother is given the first 6 weeks, because then the policy also states that the policy as well as legislation states that a mother is not allowed to return to work until after 6 weeks. If she wants to come back earlier, she needs to get clearance from the doctor, but that's because she needs to heal, whether it's from the C-section or the natural birth, but she still needs to heal for those first 6 weeks. And then the next 6 weeks, that's when she gets to then have time to bond with the child. So our argument was it would then be better to give the dad, or yeah, the dad in this case, the first 6 weeks off, so that while mommy is healing, daddy is there taking care of the baby. And then while mommy then has the balance of the 6 weeks thereafter, then the dad can go back to work, you know?
yeah,
So we had argued it in that way. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because those first 6 weeks you learn to be there as a dad. You figure things out. You have either someone helping you, or if you're experienced, you kind of know what to do, and you're supporting both mom and baby at the same time.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, there's still so much work that needs to be done in terms of those policies and
Yeah.
just creating some form of balance when it comes to new parenthood, particularly in the corporate space. But that's a whole different big conversation on its own. So let's talk like the first 3 days for you. How was that experience like as a new dad?
It was full of pride. Because I remember the day after my daughter was born. I think her mom was discharged from hospital, and when we then went to fetch them, we got to the labor ward where other women were who had also given birth and were waiting to go home. My daughter was beautiful, like she was, and she still is. But yo, those days, ah, I called her my supermodel. And when I got there, the other women, I think it was something they were not used to see a father being that present, being there. So when I came and I was like, "Hey, where's my supermodel?" But yo, Papa was supermodel. Yes, that's me. And just being there, taking her, holding her in my arms, it was just one of those most beautiful moments in my life. Um, and then the 3 days spent with her, it was because we were both first time parents. Her aunts and her mother were there, just providing that support. Um, but you do see that, okay, there's so much I don't know, like they're telling you, hey, no, it's time to bath, it's time to do this to the baby, ama staples, your borstruples and your balsam copivas, all of those things. They tell you all of those things that you need. And if you didn't get those before the baby was born, it's probably around that time where you run around doing all those things and getting whatever else. And then those things like colic and whatever, like there's so much to grasp your head around that the 3 days is not even enough.
Yeah.
Because when they come home, it's now trying to make sure that everything you had prepared is how it's supposed to be. And where it's not, you fix. um, Understanding the bath times, when
Yeah.
to do that, when not to do that.
Yeah.
Ideally, bath when it's warm. Don't bath at night. Washing the clothes. All of it.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. But the thing again with me is, I had seen around my family when a newborn had been there, the things that were done. So it was not too strange. So I can think of somebody who's like really, this is their first experience, and they honestly don't know what to do. You know, that support is needed. And the fact that as men, we don't have baby showers, where we can actually say to dads, hey, Papa, now you need to be conscious of this and that and that, how to put together the crib. Yeah, Shem. That's the biggest exercise and most frustrating. Figuring out which piece goes where. Yeah,
So I think you're speaking to something so important about how essential support is in those first few days and weeks.
yeah,
Um, so my case, I had my mother-in-law to come stay with us for a couple of days. She was working at the time, so she couldn't stay with us for too long. So she stayed with us for a few days because not both my parents are late, so my mother was not in the picture to be able to help out and become that support. But it's so crazy how you actually miss your parents so much if you've lost them. When you become a parent yourself, particularly your mother, you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Mom could be helping me out. It's such a
Ish.
crazy experience when it
Yeah,
comes to grief and new parenthood. Again, another different conversation on its own. But that support structure is so important because you really do feel like you have no idea what you're doing.
yeah,
Absolutely no idea. And the falsity of the idea of parenthood, particularly motherhood, is that your motherhood instinct is supposed to kick in and you're supposed to know exactly what to do. Which is one thing we spoke about last week about is it mother instinct or is it socialization and stuff like that. Like no, but
but sorry,
connection.
just to come in there, when you talk about the mother instinct,
Mm,
right? When you mention it like that, and juxtaposing mother and father, does that mean that, in my mind, I'm thinking, does that mean that a father needs to have a father instinct? But also, from a motherly instinct, is it something that you acquire while you are pregnant and therefore gets activated when the child is born, or is it something that you are groomed into once the baby is there?
for my particular experience happened after the birth of my daughter. The motherhood instinct for me was this constant nudge of always being able to know when she needs something, and the need for me to to respond to her needs. That was the instinct for me. I don't know how it happens for dads. I've never really had a conversation about fathers regarding how the instinct works for them, even if there is an instinct that happens, particularly when a child is expressing a form of need. So, like I said, the source of the instinct for me is the connection that I've had with this human for such a long time,
Yeah.
that it continues even though the human being is no longer physically a part of me. You are there, but we're still connected in some way. Like it's you know that like nervousness that happens in the first few days of a child's life, where you constantly go to check, hey, are you still alive? You know, just just sleeping next to them to hear, are you still breathing? Because they can be so silent, and you really don't want to kill them. I think that definitely happens for both mother and father, because my husband was definitely doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I was definitely a lot more jumpier, not from a place of anxiety, but I always kind of knew when something is happening. Like the one, she used to sleep in her crib, because I wanted to establish independent sleeping, and wanted to do sleep training, and I wanted to be a fancy mom. And she slept in her crib, and then one night she was struggling with reflux, and
Okay.
she was spitting from her mouth, and it was coming out like milk was coming through her nose, so she was struggling
Yo.
to and I was fast asleep. I was gone, and we were tired. I mean, I left her sleeping peacefully, but there's something that just kicked in immediately when it started, and I just woke up, and I jumped for her, and that was the last day she ever slept in her cot ever again. Um, but yeah, just in terms of being able to be responsive to her needs, it definitely happens. Even now, um, particularly with girls, I feel a lot more connected to knowing what's happening with her in comparison to my husband. Yeah, now sadly he grew up around a lot of boys, so navigating a woman's emotions is
Eesh.
an emotional roller coaster for him. But for me, our connection happens so seamlessly that I know when she's having a tough time, and woman to woman, we're able to relate. So it definitely happened post birth for me.
Yeah. I think for dads, it's two ways. So if as a dad you've not been there during the pregnancy, right? And then there's that 3 months separation after the baby's born. And then now you have to come back and you are distant from these people. I'm saying these people intentionally. It kind of feels strange. But if you are a dad who is 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 focused on getting there and into the picture and being active, you you can work your way back into it, and then developing certain instincts, developing certain sensitivities, understanding how your child thinks, how your child behaves, observing them from there. But if you are your average guy on the street, you've not been fully present throughout the pregnancy, then there's the 3 month separation. By the time you get back into connecting with them, you almost feel distant because now the mother has bonded and she has this protective instinct that, okay, dude, you are here, but you don't know much of what has happened. I've seen this person grow over these 3 months or over this period that you were not there. And then it becomes difficult for you to catch up. So you kind of think, okay, it's the two of you. That's why some couples would separate soon after they they've had a child or during pregnancy, and there are a lot of fights, and He wants intimacy, but he does not understand. He waits for you to for those scars to heal, and once it's healed, he thinks it's going to happen immediately. It raises a lot of things that happen, but it's not because he's selfish. It's because he's unaware of what to do, of how to navigate this.
Yeah.
But then for a dad who's been present throughout the pregnancy, is present during labor, and is present even after the baby and the mother come home. It's a totally different experience because you would have gone through certain emotions. You would have seen her go through the pregnancy, the first trimester, the first, second, and third trimesters, the changes in her body, and by the time then the baby's born, you you would have bonded, um, and you are aware that you then need to step up and assist, not even assist, step up and play your role as the father. See how the baby is being bathed, and you also then do it next time. I know that I did a lot of the bathing with my son. I would put him in this bath. There was this thing which had beads in it, so you could put him there and he would float in this small bath that you could carry, and making sure that the room was warm as well,
Yeah.
and immediately just covering and putting lotion and all of those things, as well as the feeding. You know, learning all of that, it takes time, but once you connect from that level, you developed a certain dad instinct that it's not the same as a motherly instinct. Um, but what that one is, you have fears. I think for both a boy child and a girl child. For a boy child, as a dad, you then start worrying, how am I going to raise this young man? I don't want him to be someone who's going to be addicted to drugs, or be a thug, or be whatever when he grows up. I want him to have a certain path in life. Um, I don't want him to be I don't want him to be someone who can't stand up for himself in life. He needs to be strong. Those are the kind of things that we think about. For a girl child, it then becomes a thing of, I'm not a girl, and I have a girl child. So how do I make sure that I raise her properly? How do I cater to her needs? How do I make sure that boys don't? We think about this. Boys don't play with her. That she doesn't get played. I need to think about how to make her kind of like streetwise,
Yeah.
smart at the same time. Um, how to be this person who stands up for herself. So we worry about those things, and then we worry about things like education, providing for them. I don't want them to struggle throughout their life, um, but we don't communicate those. I can't come to you as my partner and say, "Hey, love, I'm worried about the money. Which school is our child going to go to? Will we be able to afford it?" I think about it, and then I also think about, am I really capable as a father of raising this person? Pella, now this is a person who's going to grow, but am I capable? But as time goes by, we we develop a bond, and then we kind of find our way around this thing that's called parenting. If you've had a child before and you have another child now, you then realize, I man, this one is not the same as the other one. So how do I then, like, ish, these two people, how do I understand them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Um, I think what's important to note is that being able to establish that bond and that understanding of who your children are actually just firstly requires just your physical presence, which is so complex um, in our communities in particular, because there are a lot of cultures and rules around what needs to to happen when a woman has a child. There weren't conversation within my family. Um, we're not like we very we're Christians. We do have elements of culture, particularly with weddings. But we're not like an extremely cultural family.
Okay.
So I never had to defend my views about why I don't want to go back home after I give birth. So I'm grateful for that. But then we spoke about support and how important that is. But we can set the rules around how the support can happen. Like now in my case, my mother-in-law came to stay with us for a couple of days, which was a blessing. But in some families and in some cultures, it's a lot more stricter, and couples and women have way less flexibility to decide how they want the first few days to be like. So I have some beef with the concept of situated,
Yeah.
because of how I think firstly it takes away one parent's physical presence.
Yes.
And it's always the dads that suffer. Um, being taken away from a home where you guys live together, and you've probably been there during the pregnancy. And sometimes it's not even a husband and wife. Sometimes it is a girlfriend and boyfriend. Maybe the rules are a lot more stricter that you guys are not married, so she's definitely not allowed to. You guys are not allowed to be in the same space. A lot of cultural considerations there, but we need to get to a point really where we acknowledge how important those first few days of life are for families. How those first few days are important for me and my new baby as a mother to be able to establish. We do stuff like skin to skin at the hospital. We are encouraged to continue
Mm.
doing that when we're at home because we now understand, because we are evolving, right? We are now
Yeah.
understanding how important that physical closeness is, between a mother and a child, particularly when you're trying to establish a breastfeeding relationship, which is also a challenge on its own. But that skin to skin is equally important for dads as well. Dads also deserve to have a bond with their child, because what skin to skin and what that physical presence actually does and has been proven to do is develop a loving connection between a parent and a child. And fathers should never be exempted from that. Um, so it's a bit of a tricky situation in Black communities to be able to establish a parenting journey based on support from the matriarchs of the family, without
Yeah.
the same support taking away the opportunity of a father to be able to be there with their child while they are acclimatizing to this new environment. Because if you've been there and they've been hearing your voice, I mean, you've been talking to them and you've been telling them how excited you are to meet them, and then all of a sudden, after your birth, you get to hold them and say something to them, and then boop, nothing.
Mm. Mm.
Nothing from the dad. So I think that really starts off a relationship between fathers and children on a very tricky note. And you're right, by the even the first month, even if you just say we're only doing a month, even just that month is so overwhelming on the relationship, because they're gonna come back, and a month later, I as a mom I've established some form of routine about how I'm going to
Yeah.
this. We've already established the breastfeeding relationship. I already know gore, ya, o robala ka nako e, o tsewa this time, at this time she's a bit niggly, she doesn't like cold weather, she likes this, she likes that.
Yeah.
And then bam, now you're a dad in the picture after a
Ish.
month or 3 months, and now you're a dad in the picture, and now you have to navigate this new experience of having a new life in your house, that's crying all the time, and you don't know why. and then and then I think that's where it gets tricky, because I think what happens with moms is I'm figuring this out, so you also figure it out. So sometimes
Yeah.
we find ourselves being challenged to verbalize or be able to guide you. You spoke about that, how important it is for mothers to guide their partners in those first few in the beginning of the journey, right? Actually, throughout, we're just supposed to guide each other throughout. But it's so
Mm.
hard for us to communicate our expectations, to say, listen, I'm gonna breastfeed this child and I'm really tired, so I'd really like you to burp them. So what
Yeah.
we do instead is we breastfeed, and then when you don't show the interest in burping the child, then we sit there in resentment,
Ish.
um, and we burp them ourselves, and then we just pissed off and we're annoyed, particularly at night when it's 2 a.m. and I'm here breastfeeding and you're here snoring,
Mm.
snoring, snoring. It creates so much, resentment. But when
Mm.
we don't establish and we don't communicate what the expectations are from both ends from the beginning of the journey, and there's no physical separation, then we can establish the relationship a lot more seamlessly, and the challenges are always going to be there, but we can navigate them so much better, because we understand that it is important for you to just be here, right?
Yeah.
We don't always know what to do, but because you are just here, you are just physically here. Physical presence is so important, and it's very difficult for us to be able to overthrow the authority, right? To tell the uncles and the aunts to say, listen, no, I don't want that. Brain science says, but I think it's always important to choose what's important to us. We can establish support, but we
Mm.
can really not dictate the terms of how the support looks like, but we can really talk and have conversations around how that support looks like, without it starting the relationship between a father and child on a rocky basis as strangers that don't really know each other 3 months down the line.
You know, you've touched on so many important things. And my mind also goes into boyfriends and girlfriends, and the boy stays at his parents' home, girl stays at her parents' home, and the baby is born, right? It's not easy for him to be there at night when you as the mother now have to breastfeed and then burp the baby by yourself. Yes, you do have that support structure, and sometimes maybe you don't within that family. But as if you're a boyfriend and a girlfriend who are staying together, at least it's better because you can decide what you do before the baby's born. But if you haven't, again, you're left with those gaps where you've never communicated or discussed with each other. Babe, what happens when the baby's born? Are you gonna go home, or do you want to go home for those 3 months? Okay, can we make concession that at least you go for a week or two and then you come back? Because that's what my wife and I did. We agreed that she was going to go home for her family to get to see the baby, but because of duties this side, I would stay behind. So her family was with her, but even then, her mom had also come up um, when our baby was born. So she was here, I think, for the first 2 weeks. And then what then happened was after her mom needed to go back. When her mom went back, she also went back, but only for 2 weeks and came back.
Yeah,
Because I was adamant, I want my baby and my wife here,
yeah.
and I would then be present. So if that conversation didn't happen, it would be left kind of like in the air. So there are so many dynamics around this that we can just keep talking and talking.
But can I
You
just
want to address the comment?
sorry,
Yeah,
before I address Kone's comment. When it comes to the boyfriend and girlfriend dynamic, we also have to realize that it's also very culturally driven,
yeah,
because I have seen a boy, like a young man or whatever, seeing his child through a fence of a complex, because he's not allowed to go inside
Yo,
the house and sit with the child because he hasn't paid damages,
yo.
right?
Mm,
It's a cultural consideration, because then if Shapu, they boyfriend and girlfriend and they're not married and they're having a kid out of wedlock, yes, we're very disappointed as parents. But then we take it a step further to say, actually, you won't see this child until you give us a certain X amount of money. Very cultural. Whereas we could actually just acknowledge to say they could, they don't have to be completely separated because of that. Yes, they're boyfriend and girlfriend, but he can still come and spend 2 hours with the kid a day. It still makes it very rocky. It's like the 3 days, maternity leave where you just stay for 3 days and then the rest of the time. But then at least you're there.
mm,
Like
yeah.
you're just physically there. Your kid is able to smell you. The kid is able to hear your voice. The kid is able to know that, oh, dad is here. And you might not be as actively involved as a boyfriend versus a husband, but your physical presence is so important. Whereas you can just go home, you just go to your girlfriend's house and hold the baby for 2 hours. But because our culture is so complex, you won't be allowed to do that because you haven't paid damages. Corneille says it's interesting. Many cultures and religions around the world does not have these gender-related things. Why is there such a thing in South Africa? Both parents are parents because society still has dictated that parenting roles are gender-specific. That's why dads shouldn't change diapers, and that's why dads shouldn't put babies on their backs. I wanted to stay home and I could stay home, but the law is so biased and against me that I could not get leave to look after my own child based on my gender. It's
Yes.
it's so mind blowing. It's so mind blowing how literally parenting roles are assigned genders. Yeah, it's so sad because then it becomes a cycle, because then if you don't change diapers and you don't become the involved dad, then your kids see that as well to say, oh, okay, so men don't change diapers and men don't wash dishes and women do everything. Okay, then it's such a cycle. Like gender stereotypes become such a cycle. But I was saying to Zibuse, Kone, I was saying to Zibuse before the start of our conversation that I think it's so important to emphasize that you actually can, dictate the terms of your parenting journey, particularly those first few days. And legally, it becomes a challenge for you to be there more than 10 days. 10 days now, yes. More than
Yeah.
10 days, it's really hard for you to be there. But you can learn as much as you can in those 10 days, and then you can establish some form of routine after. And I know it's hard coming back from work, um, and now having to get into, okay, now I'm at home and now I'm going to be a dad. You're probably tired, but hey, I've been with the kid the whole day myself. I'm also really tired.
Yeah.
So it's so important to have that line of communication as couples to say, okay, so how are we going to sort this out? If you come back and the house is dirty, please don't look at me sideways and say, what have you been doing the whole day? Because you actually
Mm,
no idea what I've been doing the whole day. So, again, even in new parenthood, when the child is here, I think empathy goes a long way for us not to have, constant misunderstandings and not communicating expectations.
yeah. Uh,
It's done to
it's
encourage people to get married before they can have children. For what? For,
well. I hear that comment, and I see it, but there was a time when it was relevant, when it was necessary, but today it's not. We have too many instances. We have too many absent fathers. We have too many children suffering from not having fathers present
yeah,
in their children's lives.
yeah,
That as everything else has evolved and is still evolving, I strongly believe that there are certain aspects of our culture and our traditions that must evolve.
yeah,
Um, yes, when a boy has an impregnate when a young man has impregnated a young lady, um, and it's out of wedlock, they're both still young, still under the guidance of their parents. I think the other parents, if if they have access to the other family, should say, look, your child has impregnated our daughter. Yes, fine. But when the baby is born, your child, we expect them to be in the house to do certain things, A, B, C, and D, so that he is there. He learns to take responsibility and is held accountable. Because what we do is we want them to account financially.
Yes.
um but that keep inhlawulo, right? Maso keep inhlawulo, and then mele at least ulobole. But no, if they're not ready for that, it's fine. But we need to say, yes, I'll keep inhlawulo, it's fine, but come, we want you here every day. Tina will play our part as the parents of the child, and grandparents, but you have to come, change the nappies, do certain things, and only then can you go home and do whatever it is that you do. But we
Yeah.
also expect you back, because this is both your child.
Yeah.
Um, and and until you make a decision of what to do between the two of you, if you're
Yeah.
serious about her, then yes, make a plan to make that right,
Yeah.
and then take it from there. But in terms of your presence, we need you to be present
Yes.
so that you get to understand how what it is like to raise a child.
Yeah. Can you pull up Zibuse a comment again?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. So the reality of life is that stuff happens, like, pardon my language, but shit happens all the time, like teenagers get pregnant and people that are not together get pregnant. And then when we're trying to use pregnancy to force people to be together, then we're also just starting off relationships on like very bad notes.
Consequential relationships,
Yeah, we spoke about that.
consequential marriages.
Yeah. But I understand the concept of these two people being together, the parents being together, because I personally believe in structure. Like I didn't have structure as a child growing up. I grew up in the absence of both my parents. I was raised by my paternal aunt. And I have seen how the lack of structure has manifested itself in me. Like just the lack of discipline and not having a point of reference of how a family is supposed to look like. So now I'm setting the rules of how I want that to look like. But also it's a personal preference. I know so many women that don't want to get married, but I know equally women that want to have children, right? And I'm not talking about like medical interventions to having children. They actually would like to have a child with an actual human being, and this man becomes a part of the child's life. So the structure is very important. So I get why marriage then plays a huge role in society in terms of establishing marriage societies, because it's so important. I think a lot of what we've spoken about how physical presence is important, about how communication is important, about how always being there is important. We are able to be there together if we actually do live together, right? And a lot of those times it's when we are either in a very committed relationship or we are married. So I get the concept of marriage completely. But I think it's also very important for us not to take away from the fact that our culture does then say the only accountability that a father, the biggest accountability that a father needs to have is financial, which is then what we base the definition of fatherhood on. To say um, you are a
Mm.
father. If you want to be a part of this child's life, you have to pay up. If you can't pay
Yeah.
up, you can't afford to pay up, then you're not going to see your child. And then we actually are not thinking about how that is going to look like for the relationship between the child and the father. And then when the father feels disconnected from the child now, and he does pay in Tlaulo, but now he's not, they haven't even established a relationship. Now it's tricky. Now we're calling him a deadbeat because it's our fault. We didn't give him the platform to be there in those first few days.
Yes.
Culture and law won't live in the same space anytime soon. People will most of the time favor what favors them. than doing what's right?
Yeah. I think I get where this is coming from.
Mm,
Um, but we can't stop. We can't. I don't believe in us surrendering to culture and law not living in the same space. And even if they don't, but we as people need to set the tone.
yeah,
We need to make sure that this is what we encourage each and every parent out there to do. We need to make sure that we say to our children, we say to our peers, come on, think about it.
yeah,
If we need fathers back in the picture from day one, they need to know how to do all of these things. Put the law aside. Culture is determined by people, and as people we can change. We can determine our own culture. In
yeah,
my family we have our own culture, in your family you have your own culture.
yeah,
Hey, let's do that. Let's move with that,
yeah.
and
But I
no longer just rely on things being given to us.
Yeah, I think Usfiso's comment is so complex for me because what my brain is doing is what is right, right? Because he says people most of the time favor what favors them and doing than doing what's right. But what is right? Because now this guy seeing his child over the fence, according to the family, that's what's right. He's not supposed to walk into this yard because he hasn't paid um
Eish.
lobola, right? So he hasn't paid in Traulo. So according to the family, so what is right is going to always be subjective because of the law versus the culture. So we need to
Mm.
be careful when we talk about what's right versus what's not, because it's always going to be such a complex thing. To say the parents feel like they are doing what's right, they are abiding to the culture of the family, because our parents are not having conversations about brain science and skin to skin and connection and psychology and all of that stuff. These are the conversations that we're having. So, in light of those conversations and us recognizing what is important, that poor boy is still gonna go there and still try and see the child and have the conversation with the mom to find out what's happening. Because what's right to him is trying to be there. You know, his friends are telling him as a young dad now. Someone said that in today's time, I know plenty fathers that are hands down better parents than moms. Yes, because we're having these platforms and we're having organizations like that in the picture that are encouraging fathers to say, listen, man, even if you are unemployed, even if you don't have the means to provide for your kids don't only see money from you, your kids don't only need money from you, just be there. And then this guy tries and goes and check up on the kids, so he's trying to do what's right because there are people that are communicating to him what he needs to do now as a man. But then it's hard for him because these things are now in conflict, so what's right is always constantly going to remain in conflict with when it comes to the law, versus culture versus morality. What examples are we presenting to our younger generation? Boys grow up realizing that they are perceived as a lesser parent due to court statistics, schools only communicating with mothers, etc. Instead of putting all the blame on these young men that were raised like this, the government, the Department of DSD, and social and society need to take more responsibility to make South Africa a more father-friendly country. Yeah, like putting family bathrooms in shopping centers or malls to give mothers access to changing diapers. You know what a privilege
Yes.
is. It's
Yo,
only
I've used those, eh? I've used those.
yes, and but they are like they are family friendly ones, but they are only in
Mm.
certain parts of society. So what are we
Yeah.
still then communicating? Because I've been advocating for that for so long to say dad's diapers are not gender specific. Like if my daughter now had to go to Maponya Mall
Yeah.
go on a date with my daughter, and my daughter says, "Oh, Dad, I need to go to the bathroom." What must happen?
Ish.
That
Yeah.
that now my daughter have to go into the male bathroom because the dad can go there because the dad can't go. And I'm talking like maybe now, no, my daughter still wouldn't go in there on her own because she's like what 3 going on 4. As when they go older, it's very different. So our society, like there's so many things in society. We really do need a friendly society. And we need to continue having a lot more of these conversations, honestly, because now it really boggles me how this is still a thing in like in 2021. But we're making some progress.
Yeah, I think next week we need to come back with the same topic, picking it up from where we are about to leave this one, because there's just so much to cover,
Yeah,
and time is just definitely on our side. But
yeah,
I'd like to invite all our guests who are tuned in now to please come back next week, and we pick this up, and possibly have them join us on screen, share their views,
yeah,
especially Corney. I can see you're very passionate about this. Sfiso as well. Would like to also
yeah,
invite you next week, and let's take this. Let's have a conversation around this.
yeah, yeah.
But unfortunately, for this week, we have to cut this one
Right.
here. Ngesizulu kuthiwa zinqunywa amakhanda ziyekwe.
Yes.
So while it's still hot, let's park it here. Thank you for tuning in. Please join us next week. I'm definitely advocating for part 2. I know it's just not what we had planned, but
Yeah.
yeah, the latter part just came on and fiery.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Oh, we'll be honored to join in. Yay, Kone. We'll definitely see you next week. Please. Please,
Yes,
that would be great. That would be
awesome.
great. Awesome.
Have
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This has been absolutely incredible. These are really important conversations that we should continue having, and we are honored to be able to access platforms to be able to advocate for such important conversations. From myself, Karabo, and Zibuse, Lady Zibuse. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will definitely see you next week.
well done, and thank